I'm Reuben, and I'm the Managing Director at Smudge. Smudge is a software development firm that helps people solve problems in their business with custom software. We've created this series to help customers learn more about the software development process and the key things that set development projects up for success. In this episode, I'm talking to Emma Tommasini from Nature about using research to deliver strategic insights to help customers solve problems. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this conversation was the similar approach to understanding the intent of their problem and then using the best tools and methodologies to deliver a solution. Emma, thank you so much for taking time to come and join me on this podcast episode today. I just want to get started with talking a little bit about Nature, the company that you work for, and what your role is and what Nature does.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds good. Thank you for having me today. So I work for Nature, which is a strategic insights consultancy. We're based in Australia. So we've got offices in Melbourne and Sydney, and we've got a few people in New Zealand as well. So we're about 18 years old as a business. And what we do is really help businesses make decisions in a nutshell. And the way we do that is we use evidence to solve those problems. So it could be primary research that we collect ourselves, or it could be secondary data. So it could be things like trends analysis or other research that other people have done and ingest all that information to help businesses understand decisions that they should make next.
That's a great introduction. Thank you. So primary research, how much of your work would be that versus doing secondary research? Like, do you call it secondary research?
Secondary research. Yeah, I'd say it's the majority is primary research, and primary can be lots of different types of things. So you could be doing some more exploratory work where you might be observing people or talking to them and really understanding them and their behavior. But it can also be putting hard numbers behind things as well, so you've got more robustness behind those decisions. So I'd probably say a majority is primary, and then also looking at other secondary data, because it helps to tell a more holistic picture when you've got lots of different data sources that you triangulate and you bring together.
Okay. So for us, when we're building software, one of the things that we're often doing would be really going and sitting alongside users, going and spending time with them to understand what they do and help us make good decisions about how we're going to design or build something. We typically have a couple of ways that we do that, which is mainly trying to follow, understand, and spend time in the field, mainly because we find a really quick way to see how people are actually working. What kinds of different sort of primary research do you do?
In that sort of sense, yeah. So there's so many different types that you can do, and it's really about the problem that you're trying to solve for. So we always start with the outcome first. Be like, this is what we're trying to achieve. What's the best way to go about that? And there's not always a single way that you can get to what that outcome is. Sometimes there's lots of different ways that you can do that. So it's really important that you brainstorm and think about how we're going to best tackle this problem. But in terms of an example that you gave, how do you get alongside and observe and see how people do things? We might do things where we want to observe how people are making decisions in a supermarket environment. So we've done ones recently around how people are deciding what they buy when it comes to soft drinks. So what you can do is you can send people on a mission or a task to a supermarket, and they will record themselves as they're in store, and you can see where they're looking, the decisions that they're making. They do a bit of a voiceover to talk you through what they're considering and thinking. And you can do a lot of those at 100 videos and then see across all of them what are some of the themes that are coming out. So are people paying a lot of attention to the specials tickets, or are they getting really influenced by certain packaging that's really grabbing their attention at shelf? So they can be some things that are really nice ways to get really close to that in-the-moment decision-making for consumers.
So in a very practical sense, you'd send consumers a brief and say, can you go out with your iPhone and just film and record yourself going through a supermarket and just verbalizing what you're seeing as you're going around?
Exactly. And it's got lots of different other applications as well. So you could do it when you're going to a cinema. You could do it when you're going to an electronics store. So you can use it in lots of different ways. Yeah.
Okay. I think, and what other sorts of styles of things would you do? Purely digital kind of research where it's only getting people to look at images or make questions about that? What is that?
Yeah, so there could be things around advertising and comms. So it might be the client's developed a particular campaign or a series of executions, and we want to test those to see the impact of them. So you might actually have them in market and you want to test the impact of that, or it could be even pre-market and you want to test that kind of early stage idea to see if it's hitting the right notes and it's delivering against the strategy. But then it can be also things in terms of brand and measuring if you are delivering against the strategy of the brand, all the way through to how do you optimize pricing in market. So it might be, how do you get the promotions right for a particular product in a supermarket? How do you optimize that, or the look and the feel of the packaging? So it's quite a broad spectrum. It can go from really foundational, strategic to like super tactical.
Yeah, okay. And would you say, do you think there are any common misconceptions people have around the work that you do? Like when you're talking to new customers, or things that people commonly go, things that are different to what they'd expect?
Yeah. I think definitely. I think a lot of the time people probably think market research and they put that in quite a traditional box of how they might think problems get solved. We don't call ourselves a market research company because we're more than just that. And like I said, it's more about the strategic insights and using lots of different data to solve problems. So that probably might be a common misconception. That's probably the main one that comes to mind.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so people coming along thinking you're just going to do a piece of research, as opposed to it's actually you care about solving a problem, and then you've got tools that you're going to use to work out how to help solve that problem.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of different ways to solve problems too. I think sometimes you might get a brief and a client might try and already solve how they're going to answer that.
Sure.
Whereas the reality is sometimes it's helpful to say, well, this is what the problem is. Tell us how you can go about and solve that. And there's so many different ways that we can come at that.
Yeah. I think we find a very similar thing in the kind of work that we do, in terms of actually by the time you really dig a little bit further and go, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Actually, there's so many different ways and techniques that you can use to get there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always necessarily look like the same way to get there.
Yeah, exactly. I think being able to understand really clearly what the problem is often an art in itself, because I think a lot of the time what can happen is there's a brief from somebody senior, it gets passed down to another team, then maybe to an insights team, and then it gets briefed into the agency. And so meaning can obviously get lost along that pathway, can't it? And so as the agency, we have to make sure we ask really good questions to really understand, like in a nutshell, this is what you're trying to do, but not solve for it initially. First is all about understanding the problem and what success looks like.
Yeah. I mean, there's almost the same language that we use and talk about with solving problems, but then we're building software solutions as opposed to delivering insights.
Yes, that then feed into it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of software tools that you use for doing that research, are there specific tools that you like? Do you have a tool that you use for doing like a brief that goes out to the supermarkets for, like, how do you go and engage with consumers, or what sort of tools do you use?
Yeah, there's so many different ones that we use. So if it's a more traditional like survey where we need to collect primary data, we would just write the survey ourselves. There's no like specific software or anything like that. You just typically do that in a Word document, have all your programming instructions and your questions that you're asking, and obviously making sure they are answering the brief. And then we would send that on to a third party that then scripts that up, and then you can invite people to do that survey. When we get it back, then we use other analytical software to analyze all of that data and, do more advanced analytics on it to, again, if that's needed to help solve whatever the problem is. If it's something that's maybe more exploratory in nature and you want to go out and you want to speak to consumers or do the video example that I spoke about, then there's different partners that we would engage with and reach out to help us to get those people to do those different types of tasks.
I want to change gears slightly and just talk about how you solve problems in your own business and kind of we use software and things. One thing we've talked about before in the past, I thought maybe a good place to start, is just around onboarding experience and thinking about what that's like for people. I remember we'd talked about some of the tools that we do and like particularly just doing tailored email series and things, and I think you've looked at doing something similar or possibly adopted some things.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, this is something we've done recently in our business, maybe in the last year or so, to try and make that onboarding experience a lot more consistent for people. I think we were finding that, somebody might say something a certain way and somebody says it differently. And so you don't have that really nice, consistent experience, and also getting that consistent download of knowledge that's so important. But also you don't want to hate it all at once, because there's always so much to learn when you're in a new role. It can probably be quite overwhelming. So also, how do you spread that out, but not make it super tactical, but also like, how do you bring them in strategically around the vision of the company and where we've come from and where we're going. So we sat down and really thought about, well, what are all the things that you need to know when you start? So there's things we've got around like our culture and a bit of the history of our company, all the way through to learning and development and how we do that and how you can access that to who our clients are, and read some case studies, interesting projects we've worked on in the past. So we as a team really sat down and thought about what all those different kind of modules would be, and then set about everyone kind of creating content for that. And then we've put it into like little mini chapters. So it sits on our learning and development platform called Nurture, and people can go in and read that in their own time. But I also like to sit down with people where it's relevant and actually chat through some of that content. So for example, if it's the one about the history of nature, let's sit down and have a chat about that and tell you a little bit of the stories of how it started and the offices that we moved into and the things that we learned along the way.
Yeah, so you're able to use the digital, like in the learning development, put the content so it's a way that it's consistent across everybody, but then augment that with in-person conversations, experiences, and
make it a bit more human too, because no one wants to come in and just read stuff for months, do they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what about other kinds of tools that you use in the business? What do you use to run the business? What does that look like?
Yeah, sure. So one thing we've started using for managing workflow is Monday.com. Don't know if you've used that before, but that can be a really good workflow management tool. So you can put in it the different projects that you're working on, create templates. So you've kind of got your set tasks that you would do, augment that depending on the project. You can assign people against it, due dates. So it's a nice way to keep track of where all the different projects we're working on at any given time are. And if other people need to swing in and help, you can see where it's at. But you can also just put other general tasks, obviously, into that as well. I think sometimes the to-do lists can be long, so it's just an easy way to keep track of everything and see where it's at. And so we use that, and that can also help in terms of managing resourcing and workload as well. So you get like a macro view, so you can see if someone's got too much work on, then you can shuffle things around as part of that. And then as a business, we've started using Salesforce as well from a financial perspective. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about systems and processes, how they fit together. So what does it look like for a customer when you're working really well with them? What does that look like?
Yeah, awesome. Great question. So when we're working really well with a client, I think when they let us in more and really help us understand more around the actual problem or the decisions they're going to make off the back of it, I think that often leads to much better outcomes. So say, for example, I'm looking at some results of something. If I know a lot more information around the business and the decisions that they're making or decisions they might not want to make, I will look at that piece of data with a really different perspective. And that then might, push into, there might be a recommendation off the back of that. But if I don't have that background knowledge, then I might not approach that in the same way. I think also really what helps working well with clients is when they help to really articulate what the problem is and not solve for it. I think that can be so easily done so much of the time, but really putting it on the agency to say, this is what we're trying to do. Give us some ideas of how you might best approach that. And I think also the client helping us understand if things are changing along the way. I think sometimes at the beginning of a project, it might be that we think it's going to set out this particular way, but things can change and objectives can change. And so having the relationship where you can talk about those things and say, actually, we were going to do this particular study at this point. Actually, we need to change gears and it needs to look different now, and let's rescope it and chat about what that should look like based on the information we know now.
I really enjoyed this conversation, particularly about it relates so similarly to how we work with people as well, which is you have to keep going back. We think of it more of intention, and what is the intention? Where are these people trying to get to? What is the problem they're trying to solve? And you keep going back there. And particularly when you said as well, it might not look like what you think it's going to look like at the beginning. I think that's one of the hardest things, and that part of the pitch for going in with someone isn't in here's the outcome that we're going to get, because we don't know exactly what it is, but actually we know how to do this kind of work and the process and the methodology, and we know that it'll get us to a good outcome.
Yes.
But I don't know what the outcome is right now, because when you're starting a project, because if I knew, then I wouldn't have to do that other work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that might probably happen more in your field of work than ours. I think sometimes projects for us tend to be a bit more contained, that you know the outcome that we're shooting for. But that's not to say that some projects might have lots of different stages, and you might need to have some stop and thinks along the way and reassess and say, does what we think 3 months ago, does that still hold? And if so, great, green light. But if not, let's rethink that.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come and talk today, and really appreciate it.
No worries at all. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for watching. We really hope that you got something out of this conversation. If you have any questions that have arisen, please reach out on our website, smudge.com.